greatest songs in history sometimes walked a razor's edge between existing and disappearing forever. A wrong tempo, a rejected demo, or a single moment of self-doubt could have erased them entirely. These are 10 Beatles songs that almost never existed. Number 10. Please Please Me by the Beatles.
I don't wanna stop complaining, but you know there's always rain in my heart.
George Martin heard the original version and described it plainly as a very dreary song, comparing it to a slow, bluesy Roy Orbison number. He told the band to rework it entirely before he would consider recording it properly. The arrangement that came back to the studio bore almost no resemblance to what they had first presented. By November 26, 1962, the reworked version was ready, and it took 18 takes to capture the final recording. Martin immediately predicted it would be their first major hit. McCartney later admitted the band were a bit embarrassed that he had found a better tempo than we had. The single was released in the UK on January 11, 1963, reaching number 1 on both the New Musical Express and Melody Maker charts, though it peaked at number 2 on the Record Retailer chart. Without Martin's intervention, the song that launched Beatlemania might have been quietly shelved. Number 9. Strawberry Fields Forever by the Beatles.
Strawberry fields forever.
Starting in November 1966, the band spent 55 hours across 5 weeks creating multiple versions of the track. The final recording required combining 2 entirely different versions, captured at different tempos and in different keys. In the analog era, joining them seamlessly was a genuinely serious technical problem. Lennon told Martin he liked the opening of one version and the ending of another. Martin warned him there were 2 things against combining them. They were in different keys and different tempos. Lennon simply replied, "Yeah, but you can fix it, George." Against the odds, Martin and engineer Geoff Emerick discovered that slowing down take 26 by 11.5% brought both versions into alignment. The result was released on February 17, 1967 as a double A-side single with Penny Lane and immediately ranked among the most technically adventurous recordings in pop history. Number 8. Yesterday by the Beatles.
Oh, yesterday came suddenly. Why?
Originally recorded for their 1965 album Help, Yesterday remains one of the most covered songs in history, with over 2,200 recorded versions worldwide. But for weeks after the melody first came to him, McCartney was convinced he had unintentionally stolen it from someone else. He went around asking friends and fellow musicians, genuinely unsure whether it was truly original. A placeholder lyric titled "Scrambled Eggs" stood in for months while McCartney searched for the right words. The breakthrough came in May 1965, when he and Jane Asher flew to Albufeira in the Algarve, where they visited the home of Shadow's guitarist Bruce Welch. McCartney borrowed Welch's guitar and completed the lyrics there. The track was recorded at Abbey Road on June 14, 1965, 4 days before McCartney turned 23. The melody that had arrived in a dream had spent over a year waiting to become a song. Number 7. Something by the Beatles.
Something in the way she moves.
Released as a double A-side single with Come Together, Something reached number 4 in the UK charts and number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Frank Sinatra called it the greatest love song of the previous 50 years. But George Harrison spent the better part of a decade fighting to have his compositions taken seriously within his own band. Throughout the 1960s, Lennon and McCartney dominated the songwriting credits, and Harrison's contributions were routinely allocated limited studio time. His persistence through that resistance was what eventually made something possible. Harrison had quietly developed some of his finest work during those years, but the barriers were real and consistent. The song was released on the Abbey Road album in September 1969 and became Harrison's most celebrated composition, a song that very nearly stayed buried beneath the weight of his bandmates' dominance over the catalog. Number 6. Let It Be by the Beatles.
Speaking words of wisdom, let it be.
The Get Back sessions of January 1969 were conceived as a return to live, unadorned performance. What the cameras captured instead was something far more uncomfortable. Open arguments, creative paralysis, and a band struggling to hold itself together. The sessions collapsed in a state of unfinished business, leaving the tapes in limbo for over a year. Engineer Glyn Johns assembled 2 complete album mixes from the sessions, and the band rejected both. Producer Phil Spector was eventually brought in to salvage the project, adding orchestral and choral overdubs to several tracks, including the title song Changes that McCartney publicly objected to. The album arrived in May 1970, the same month the band officially dissolved. What began as a document of renewal became, in the end, a farewell nobody had planned for. Before we continue, which of these stories surprised you the most? Did you ever discover Let It Be for the first time on an old record? Drop a comment below and let us know where in the world you are watching from.
Why you say goodbye, I say hello. Hello, hello.
Number 5. While My Guitar Gently Weeps by the Beatles.
Why my guitar gently weeps.
During the White Album sessions in 1968, George Harrison brought in a song that nearly no one in the band seemed to want. His bandmates' engagement was minimal, and early takes suffered for it. Harrison had written it as a direct challenge to himself, allegedly opening a book at random and committing to write a song around whatever phrase he first read. Frustrated by the lack of focus in the sessions, Harrison invited his friend Eric Clapton, Cream's lead guitarist, to play on the track. Clapton was hesitant about recording on a Beatles session uninvited, but Harrison insisted. The presence of an outside musician forced Lennon and McCartney to work more professionally in the studio. The song appeared on the White Album in November 1968, featuring one of rock's most emotionally devastating guitar performances, built entirely on Harrison's refusal to let the song be dismissed.
Hey, 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 and I do.
Number 4. Hey Jude by the Beatles.
Hey Jude, don't make it bad.
It began as a private gesture, written for a 5-year-old boy during one of the most painful periods of his young life. McCartney wrote it while driving to visit Julie and Lennon during John and Cynthia's divorce in the summer of 1968. Within the draft lyrics, McCartney had written a placeholder phrase he fully intended to replace before the session. "The movement you need is on your shoulder." He considered it a throwaway line, too vague to keep. It was Lennon who heard the rough version and convinced him to leave it, calling it one of the best lines in the song. Hey Jude hit number 1 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 on September 28, 1968, and held that position for 9 consecutive weeks, becoming the best-selling Beatles single up to that point.
I was alone, I took a ride, I didn't know what I would find there.
Number 3. In My Life by the Beatles.
And some of my living, my life.
John Lennon later called In My Life his first real major piece of work, describing it as the first time he had written consciously about his own life. The earliest draft, however, was barely recognizable as the song it would become. It began as a long autobiographical poem cataloging specific streets, bus routes, and landmarks from Lennon's Liverpool childhood, before being stripped back to something far more universal. The most distinctive element of the final recording also came close to never happening. George Martin played the Baroque-style keyboard solo on a standard piano, but recorded it at half speed, and then played the tape back at normal speed, producing a sound resembling an antique harpsichord. The technique was unlike anything previously used in popular recording. The track was recorded on October 18th and 22nd, 1965, and released on the Rubber Soul album on December 3rd, 1965. It is now ranked among the greatest compositions ever recorded.
I'm so glad that she's my little girl.
Number 2. Come Together by the Beatles.
Come together right now.
In 1969, Timothy Leary mounted a campaign for governor of California against Ronald Reagan. Leary asked Lennon to write a campaign song, and his slogan, "Come Together, Join the Party," gave Lennon a starting point. Lennon agreed, sketched out an early version, and the song began to take shape. Leary's campaign collapsed when mounting legal troubles forced him to drop out of the race. Lennon liked the song enough to bring it to his bandmates during the Abbey Road sessions, Originally a faster rocker, it was McCartney who suggested they slow it down. Lennon had borrowed the opening line from Chuck Berry's "You Can't Catch Me," which drew the ire of the song's publisher. The legal dispute was eventually settled out of court. One of the most recognized opening tracks in rock history had begun its life as campaign material for a political race that never happened.
Do anything but lay high, my two-way.
Number 1. Now and Then by the Beatles. Approximately 45 years. That is how long this song waited to be heard. John Lennon recorded a quiet piano demo at his Dakota apartment in the late 1970s. After his death in Nice, December 1980, the cassette remained with Yoko Ono, who shared it with the surviving Beatles in January 1994. George Harrison attempted to work with the recording during the anthology sessions, but the technology of that era could not cleanly separate Lennon's voice from the tape noise. The project was shelved. It remained untouched for nearly 3 decades. In 2023, AI audio separation technology, the same used in Peter Jackson's Get Back documentary, finally made it possible to isolate Lennon's voice cleanly. McCartney and Ringo Starr completed the track, adding new harmonies and instrumentation. Released in November 2023, it became the final Beatles single. Of all the songs on this list, none more literally almost never existed.
Was just 17.